The fascination with going to space. Is this a big dick contest with Elon? Is he really curious? What advantage does that give them?
I think engineers want bigger problems. And I think it's like I think of them looking into space is for the same reasons why I became interested in sustainability.
Okay.
At some point, if it looks like you can kind of do things, then you start questioning and you start feeling, because when you start off in your career and you're young, you're kind of like, am I capable? Can I even hang in the arena that I'm pursuing?
Yeah.
Once you sort of get validation and you feel that you can do that, you're like, well, what is the legacy? What am I actually here to achieve other than just being another asshole that's doing the same thing as all these other assholes,
right,
and making a good living? But I look at them and I'm at that level, but like, is it really that meaningful or important?
Yeah.
So I do think that that's that sort of legacy pursuit of being a multi-planetary species is like, I don't think that's bullshit. I think they're sincere about that.
Okay.
But I think the motivation to pursue it aggressively and lose a lot of money at it is the ego-driven part. So I think things can be ego-driven and sincere at the same time.
But is this the first thing that we've seen like Bezos do that isn't increasing his current businesses? Like everything that he's done that you said before the space exploration, each one of those fields improves his ability to sell goods.
Right.
Right? Or he's going to get into the good itself, right? Which is the healthcare. But space, how the fuck does that help him sell books, sneakers, cabinets, etc.? Clothes, that makes sense. Like if you have, for example, like they do the Amazon Prime, they do the video, right? Or what is it? They do movies, TV, it doesn't matter. I'm sure at a certain point, you're going to be able to pause the program, see the person's shirt, and you will be able to link to where you can buy that shirt on Amazon if it exists on Amazon. Right. If that doesn't already exist right now. Mm-hmm. So it's a perfect advertisement for selling the goods. How the fuck does space help that?
I'm not sure it does. I think it's highly possible that they're post-rationalizing it. So it might be that you decide, I want to go to space.
Yeah.
And
why is it good?
And then you're like, how can I make money to fund it along the way? And it might be with some sort of telecommunications, satellite system, stuff like that. The other thing that I think is interesting is there's a considerable amount of money in government contracts. And Amazon, and it's kind of funny, right? Like, I'm interested in the gossip of these things because, one, we use these platforms on a daily basis for our work. We both put videos up on YouTube, so Google, what happens with Google matters to us. We use Instagram and Facebook for monetization. I care what Facebook is doing, and I use Amazon affiliates for moving product and stuff like that in my videos. So I use these things, and the people that are running them are kind of interesting, but still very flawed. So you can feel both like envious of their success and occasionally superior, like, what the fuck is this idiot doing? And I think that's the most intriguing thing is when somebody is better at something or in a situation, you're kind of like, they get your attention because you're like, I'm not quite there yet. They have more money than me. But at the same time, but they made mistakes. We love seeing people more successful than us in situations that justify us to temporarily call them an idiot. So I think the space thing is partially ego-driven, but it doesn't mean that it's bad, and it's still probably good. And they might have a million possibilities for how they can monetize it. And I don't think their vision has to be perfect. I think with any of these tech companies, they tried a lot of things exactly because they weren't sure what was going to make the most money. And then they slowly cut away to things that don't work. I mean, remember Google Glass? And now Google's not pushing it. And that's a good thing. That's
Google just can't make products. They're great at software, but hardware, forget it. Like,
oh, they make phones for poor people. But it's like, it's good that they try, right? Like, you've got to try things that are different, and then you also have to give up on them when it's not clear or when it's clearly not working.
But don't you think that, like, just back to the Google thing, don't you think that's an investment in, like, a cool, and I'm going to put that under quotes, like, Apple seems to care about cool, and they seem to care about dictating culture, whereas Google's like, we just want the information, we want the data, and then we'll put things out based on information and data. I'm sure some nerds crunched some shit, and they were like, people want glasses that do things. And then they did it out. Whereas Apple's rollout would have been completely different for that.
I think Apple
First thing would have been aesthetic.
Apple is a luxury company, right? Like, it's a luxury brand with a limited amount of offerings.
This is interesting about it,
right? So if you look at like if you were to map the data of where people are using iOS versus Android, and map it over New York, and it directly correlates to real estate value. Yeah. Like Queens, look, there's a lot of
green text.
And then like Manhattan, it's all iOS.
Blue, baby.
But they're also really fanatically great about how well the hardware works. Like, and I always love it when people are like, Apple, those idiots, they got rid of my headphone jack. And then I just saw that the sales on AirPods, just AirPods, the revenue from AirPods was greater than the revenue from Spotify, Snapchat, and Twitter combined. Just that one product. And so it's like, it's always funny to me when people, what's Apple doing? They totally screwed up. They're not. It's never going to be as good. Why do they keep making things worse? This keyboard sucks. And it's like, bro, relax. Like they know
what they're doing.
Right. They were setting it up. They knew they were moving towards the wireless AirPods. They knew that they were going to slowly get rid of that. And they're just setting you up one step at a time down the road. So it's really, I think the big difference, though, Google does more research. Like they have so many initiatives. And you can go on like their websites and see what their employees are doing. They're trying so much random stuff. Like the other day, I did a talk at Google right before the pandemic. I met a bunch of employees, and they're working on like artificial intelligence and art
Grab
projects.
your mic, make sure you're good.
And I'm like, what does that have to do with like search engines and stuff like that? But they're almost run like a university where they just have all these things. They just try to keep the smart kids happy, give them a playground so they can mess around. Give them free cafeteria food, and just keep collecting that intelligence, but they're not always sure where they're going with it. Where I think Apple's like very like, we make the best products in the world that have incredibly high margins.
But they're not even the best.
What's better?
I thought that the Android phones were better. I thought they were like in terms of physical characteristics and the quality of the phone.
You're like one of the megapixel guys? Like this.
I mean, look, that's what they tell me, right? Like anybody that has one of those phones is always like, there's so many more megapixels and the video quality is so much better and this has 6 cameras instead of 4 cameras. I'm not going to use it because it's not seamless with my lifestyle and Apple's got me hooked.
Right.
But in terms of actually breaking it down, like if you want to look at statistics, right? Like we can see one basketball player is better than another. There are certain basketball players that are better than Allen Iverson. I want to hoop like Iverson.
True. Right. One, I think best is tricky, right? Because it's different for different people. But I would say that the way they advertise and talk about their products is telling. So if you see like a Google or an Android, like for the Pixel, it'll be like this many megapixels. They give you stats. If you see the billboard for the iPhone, they just show you the photo and go,
we took this with an iPhone.
Right. And it's a great photo. And it's so scoreboard related. It's like, you average that many points?
That's cute. You have
how many rings?
Pixels.
And there's no right answer to that.
And
it doesn't mean that megapixels aren't valuable, but it's just a different approach. And clearly it's resonating better with a higher end audience.
But you don't think that they're not attacking, but like attaching themselves to culture, and that's why they end up winning?
Yeah.
Like that's the move, right?
Yeah. Also,
Android just doesn't understand culture. They don't have an ambassador either. Like who the fuck? This is the weirdest thing about Google that I don't understand. You know who runs Google. I don't. Most people don't. We know who runs Tesla. We know who runs Amazon. We know who runs Facebook. We know who runs Apple. We don't know anything about fucking Google.
Well, it's also more complicated too, because like Larry and Sergey, the sort of founders, are still kind of in the scene and on the board, but they have a CEO, Sundar, who's technically the CEO, but it's a more complicated structure.
But they're not a celebrity-run company, and they don't care about using the celebrity equity to bolster their company because they've won.
Right.
Like Apple's still competing. Like Apple doesn't own the greatest market share in terms of like iPhones around the world. I imagine Google owns search.
I would say that Apple's won. Okay, now let's look at it this way, right? Take a company like Spotify.
Have they won in terms of they sell the most phones? Have they won in the way that Google has won?
I think they've won in the fact that the iPhone is the most successful product ever created in the history of mankind.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
More successful than the condom.
How many of those do you use?
It's been a decade, Ben. It's been a long time.
Only one of those products.
I had a good run with those condoms back in the day. Not very user-friendly, but I did use them quite a bit.